Pawn Hearts by Van de Graaff Generator. This isn't an album that you'll find most people that say they like progressive rock mentioning, probably because the lyrical content is a bit too dark and existentialistic and intense. The themes are the hopelessness of society, existentialistic angst. Probably Joy Division, Ian Curtis comes close with the themes of suicide and why live. There's a glimmer of hope in Peter Hamill, the lyricist on this album, lyricist and main songwriter. He's accompanied by Guy Evans on drums, Hugh Banton on organ and bass pedals, David Jackson on sax, and Robert Fripp from King Crimson features on guitar. The guitar's not overly stated on the album. I suppose that if you like 21st Schizoid Man by King Crimson, you'll probably find that is a gateway into liking the work of Van de Graaff Generator, because it keeps the same kind of intensity. There's lots of saxophone and organ on it, as does 21st Century Schizoid Man. Other progressive rock bands don't come anywhere near having the kind of themes that this album does. In comparison, Genesis and Yes are virtually in the territory of pop music. There's a majestic, complex, and even psychotic tone to this. The themes are very complex. The changes are quite complex. The structures of the music are complex. There's lots of key changes. There's lots of time changes, complex time. It sounds like, some reviewer said that it sounds like music composed by a genius in an asylum. That may be right. Is Peter Hamill mad? I've heard stories of mothers throwing away Van de Graaff Generator albums because they were very worried about their son's mental health, and they found having to listen to the work of Van de Graaff Generator in their own home was extremely disturbing. The lyrics are incredibly dense. The instrumentation's extremely diverse. It's very dark. It's a very dark and heavy album, but it doesn't sound like metal at all. It's in no way related to progressive metal, even though a lot of people that like progressive metal would probably really admire this album, especially since it was done in 1971. Opening up the sleeve, we get an image of the band with David Jackson giving a kind of Nazi salute in a way to the other members of the band. In no way has this got anything to do with Nazis or fascism. In reality, it's quite the opposite. It's basically an album that's in the vein of Jean-Paul Sartre or Albert Camus, existentialistic philosophers, with incredible musicians on it. Hugh Banton is a classically trained organist. He plays church organ, and he's got lots of albums where he plays Bach and such. David Jackson obviously comes from a jazz background. Guy Evans obviously comes from a jazz background. The way he plays drums is similar to the great jazz drummers The drumming is very free. It's probably, if you put the drums on an isolated track, it'd sound like the drumming of free jazz that you hear on a John Coltrane album. Similarly, the saxophone, if you isolated the track, you probably think you were listening to Ornette Coleman. If you heard Peter Hamill isolated playing the piano, you would think that you were listening to something from Neil Young. If you heard Hugh Banton playing the organ, you'd think you were listening to a recital in a church, played on a church organ. I highly recommend this album. Do not fear it. Dive into it. See what it does to you. It will change your perspective on music and life. Definitely a must.